As I was saying, we're lucky enough to be joined by Ms. Sumeo, who's the Commissioner of the National Human Rights Institution in New Zealand. And I'd like to pass over the floor to her, who's going to share her experiences from a New Zealand point of view, but also how, in fact, they've been looking at how ways in which we can build on the guiding principles in business and human rights. So, Commissioner Sumeo, over to you, please.
Nisan Bulavinaka, Tēnā koutou, namaste. Pacific greetings at Malo Lava, Malo Langmama, Malo Le Sulfua Manuia. Thank you for inviting me to come and close our session today. It's an honor for me to do that. Of course, here at the Human Rights Commission in New Zealand, we fully support the United Nations guiding principles, and we have been encouraging government in our submissions, and certainly we're talking with businesses, talking to unions, talking with civil society. We are encouraging people to consider the guiding principles and to take it up. At most recent UPR review of New Zealand, a recommendation was made to our government to develop a national plan to have the guiding principles embedded into the way that we do business here. Unfortunately, we are not there yet. Government is supportive of it and accepted that, but they haven't yet embarked on developing a national plan, and we are pushing for them to do that. Certainly here in the impact of COVID, we have heard throughout the two-day forum the impact of COVID on our communities. And as we've heard, as in the Pacific, it is here too that our women have been impacted significantly because of tourism and because of hospitality and impact on those sectors in retail. So our women and also our young people, if we think about our students, some of our young people who will be working in cafes and hospitality to get by, they've also suffered. And we've seen those impacts. When it comes to Pacific people and our Indigenous, our Māori people, we have heard of young people in high school leaving school as an impact of COVID and going to work in order to support their families, possibly because their caregivers or others in the household had lost their jobs as a result of COVID. So we're seeing those impacts now. And we've been speaking out publicly, calling on business to maintain engagements in good faith with their workers throughout the country. We have heard of people getting very last minute notices. So we really need our businesses to adhere to the good faith principles as required by law. COVID did not remove those obligations, those duties of businesses to treat their workers fairly and in a decent way. In terms of our Māori and Pacific communities, again, we have been significantly affected. Prior to COVID, we have what we call here an ethnic pay gap, which is a result of what our Māori and our Pacific people say is discriminatory practices in terms of wage determination and also in terms of progression within businesses. So we are hearing that they're not given the equal opportunities as they should, and that continues. So as a result of that, we're going to be launching a paper on the human rights interests of Pacific peoples. And one of the things that the Commission will be announcing is that we will be conducting a national inquiry into this ethnic pay gap, focusing on Pacific people. And that will be significant, and we will be encouraging our people to talk about the issues that they're suffering and possibly look at the reasons why businesses or how we can help businesses ensure that their practices are more transparent and fair. In terms of Pacific people, again, our small businesses, a large majority of Pacific business owned here in New Zealand are small businesses, and a number of them are unregistered. So as a result of COVID, they weren't able to receive assistance from the government. So that has placed a number of businesses and of course households who are affected at severe risk of hardship and poverty. Certainly we've heard from some of the businesses run by our recent migrants, non-Pacific recent migrants, that some of those businesses have just been abandoned. So there's a huge impact on members of our community here and our business community, as well as the Pacific community. We've heard today about climate change. Of course, we also are very worried about climate change. It affects our livelihoods, and it affects the way businesses conduct themselves. And long term, of course, if our environment isn't healthy, it affects us and affects our wealth moving forward. But we don't want expediency to suit things to suit business and things to suit the process of policy making to sideline the opportunity for communities to have input into those policies concerning our environment. So we had a review here of the Resource Management Act, and they wanted to be able to do certain things, bypassing, unfortunately, the opportunity that was previously given to communities to input. And that was a concern for us. And we made a submission accordingly, especially to support the voices of our tangata whenua, because it concerns land and natural resources that they have rights to. In terms of moving forward, for the working group, we would really welcome any support from the UN working group to encourage again our governments to establish a national plan to incorporate the United Nations Guiding Principles for businesses and ensure that our business is done in the right way. In terms of our Pacific workers, we remain concerned here at the Commission about the treatment of our RSE workers, our seasonal workers who come over. We know contracts are signed, but we certainly know that exploitation continues to exist. There's been some good progress over the last week or so in terms of increased pay and secure conditions for those workers, but we do want those contracts to be upheld. And certainly going forward, our disabled people, our young people, our women, older women continue to be marginalized in terms of access to opportunities. And we are continuously talking with businesses to ensure that they are planning to make sure that their recruitment policies, their progression policies incorporate everybody. From a human rights perspective, they have a right to work and have a right to a decent living and a right to dignity. And that must happen as part of New Zealand's recovery plan going forward. So those are my remarks. I thank you very much for all the whānau attendance and for all the work that our people are continuing to do in this space. New Zealand is dependent on our Pacific family for its wealth and its prosperity. So, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa.
Thank you, Commissioner Sumeo, and thank you for that special address. I think the day we've seen some really interesting panel discussions, really wide-ranging topics that touch upon all different aspects of human rights and business, particularly in relation to the guiding principles. Tomorrow we have a full agenda as well, with many different aspects looking at contemporary forms of slavery in the fishing sector, extractive industries, so many different plastic pollutions, so many different sessions that focus on specific issues and issues that are very specific to the Pacific as a region. So very much looking forward to it. I'd just like to thank everybody online who've joined us and everybody who's joined us in person. Looking forward to seeing you tomorrow, and thank you very much.